Hey guys, and welcome back to part 2 of the Mosaic Crochet bag tutorial. We have our base all completed, and now it's time to figure out what kind of closure we would like to have for the bag. For this example, I'm going to do a front flap, and I'm going to have mosaic straps on the sides. But you can also finish this bag with a zipper. So first things first, let's figure out the width that we're going to need for the front flap of this bag. So this one, I've done 7 skulls across, which is 7 repeats, and we're going to need the front flap to be a little bit narrower than the total width here because of the oval. We'll have the space here to put the strap, and we want to make sure that we have enough room for the strap there. So that's why we make it a little bit narrower. So the front is actually going to be 6 skulls across, which will give us 4 extra stitches on this side and this side to fit our strap. And the strap, while we're talking about it, I'm going to do the mini skulls pattern, which is the same as the previous video that I had done with the hand warmers. So this is actually the same size as this skull, and I think that would be a good width for a strap. And here is why we need to block our bags, because the seam ends up just moving along and running away, and we need to straighten this back out. So the first thing we really need to do is take this and block it so all of our edges are lined up before we even add any straps or flaps or anything. Okay, so now I have my blocking mat all connected here. I wish it would fit on one, but I had to connect 4 in order for this bag to fit. There are several different ways for you to block any finished piece, but the technique that I use the most is just water and waiting for it to dry. I have used steam from an iron before. I think that works sometimes when you have a piece that isn't super thick, but because we have 2 layers, I want it to get fully saturated and then completely dry before we do anything with it. So first things first is we are going to turn this inside out and soak the inside first. And now with just room temperature water, the cotton that tends to soak up so much water, and we cover all of the inside. Make sure you get really well on the seams and on the ends and along the bottom. And then we'll flip it over and do the other side as well. And that's pretty good now. And now we can turn it right side out again. And I've seen some videos where people will soak the entire piece, squeeze it out, and then lay it out. And I find that that makes it really wrinkly, and we're trying to straighten it, not cause any more problems. So this is why I use a spray bottle. It gets really into the stitches without having to mess it up. And then we'll do the front. And make sure you get the bottom really good, because we're going to have to move that around a lot. And adjust that into place. And we flip and do this side. And now that we're good and soaked, now we are going to kind of even collect some of the water that you have on the board. With that, it'll soak it right up. Now we need to find where our crazy seam is and make sure that we are kind of folding it so it is perfectly straight along the seam here. And this is where we are going to pin it to the board, along this seam. And just find a spot on the board and you can start pinning, but make sure that this is nice and straight across. And then I pin straight down, and once this side is nice and straight, it'll really help get all the other sides in place. And good thing to keep in mind is don't stretch this out. It doesn't need to be stretched, it just needs to be coerced into the right spot. And then before we get to the bottom, we want to look at the seam on the bottom and do the same thing. Make sure that this part is folded right along that center part here where we did that first single crochet row in the oval. Make sure that that part is the part where you're folding it right along there. So now we can pin it like that. Now I need to look at this side here and make sure that we are pinning in the exact same spot as we did on this side. We're going to have to find this part here. Make sure we have 7 across, which we do. The pin will go like this, but let's make sure that the rest are folded right. So this one we have all the way to this purple line here. And now I've moved that enough. Can be a little baggy here, but then once we pin all this down, this will all even out, especially on the top here. And that looks pretty good there. So now we can go ahead and start pinning this side too. This does take a little time and effort, but it is worth it, so everything will line up perfectly. I think that looks pretty good there. Now I'm done. And now I've just flipped this whole thing around just so I can get better access to this side to make sure that the top is nice and straight as well. So I can kind of line it up with this top line here. Make sure everybody's lined up nicely. And again, this top part might be a little wavy or it might be tight. It depends on which direction you are crocheting in, left-handed or right-handed. That looks pretty good there. We're kind of, like I said, coercing it into being where it needs to be. It looks good there. So now we can start pinning these down. Again, I go straight through. And if you have to keep adjusting, go right ahead. And I think we are all done here. And now you can take this entire board and hide it from your cat, because I can guarantee if you have a cat, he's going to want to lay on it. And I'm going to give this like 2 or 3 days to fully dry, and you can start seeing that this one's actually starting to dry already because it is still really cold here and there's no humidity at all. So this is going to dry pretty quickly, but give it more time than you think you need to. And in the meantime, we can start working on the front flap and the straps while this guy is drying. For a front flap with 6 skulls across, we need to look back at the repeats, and this one is 8 plus 1, so 8 times 6 skulls, so 48 plus 1, so we have 49, and then 2 for the border stitches, which will make 51. So we're going to start our foundation chain with 51 stitches. And when we have 51 chains across, now we are going to start our first row, hold the chain right where the hook is, chain 1, and single crochet into the second chain from the hook, and add single crochet all the way across the chain till we get to the end. And when we get to the very last stitch in the row, pull down to tighten, chain 1, pull down to tighten, and then cut. And this will be row 1. And now we can start row 2. Insert your hook into both loops of the first stitch to start our first border stitch for row 2. And then take the new yarn, pull through to make a loop. Take this tail here, the short tail, loop it around the hook and pull all the way through. And now insert your hook back into that hole. chain 1 with purple, and then single crochet back in the base of this stitch here, the very first stitch. And that is your first border stitch for row 2. And now top row back loop only, single crochet all the way across. Every single stitch, single crochet, back loop only, and stop when you have 1 stitch left at the end of the row. And in the last stitch in the row, insert your hook into both loops, single crochet, pull down to tighten, chain 1, pull down to tighten, cut, and that is your ending border stitch for row 2. And now we will start row 3. Once again, insert your hook into both loops for the border stitch, hook your yarn, pull through to make a loop, flip the tail through, insert your hook back into that new hole, and then chain 1, single crochet into the base of both loops. And now we will start row 3, which will be working with the chart. Now I'm going to actually make the front of my bag exactly the same as we did on the bag itself. So the front flap, we're going to start with row 3 and 4. We're going to skip rows 5 and 6, just like in the previous video. And then I'm going to continue, and we're going to have 4 rows of skulls. So 2 full sections of the chart. So now from this point on, every single first stitch here will have a border stitch. Every single last stitch here will be a border stitch, and everything in between will follow the chart. And I am going to do the rest of this panel off camera, and I will see you at the end of that section. Now that we have our front flap finished, we are ready to figure out what we're going to do with these edges. There are a few different options. If you don't want to weave in all of these ends, I would suggest adding fringe in 2 colors, so both purple and black fringe kind of variegated on both sides. And that way you really only have a very small amount of yarn to weave in at the top here. If you want to get rid of all of these, you will need to weave in all of the ends. For this one, I'm actually going to weave in every other end because I'm going to add purple fringe and weave in just the black. And you can see that this is definitely going to need to be blocked, but we need to finish all of the edges before we block anything. So to start, we are going to weave in the last 5 rows on the top here into the back. And the reason why we're doing that is because we don't want this to get in the way of where we attach the straps. So when we flip the panel over to close the bag, we don't want to have fringe that's constantly getting in the way of the strap. So we're just going to turn this over and work in just these last 5. So just like before, we are going to weave in the needle first and find the stitches that run up and down. Those are the easiest to get into, and just make sure that you're not going into any of the front stitches. So just straight across, doesn't need to be super long, we're just hiding these to get them out of the way. So once it's in about 1.5 inches, then we can then thread the needle, only leave it a short bit out, and then pull through. And don't pull super tight because you don't want to make the front part squished. So we want to just keep it straight and all the way through, but don't pull so hard that you're pulling the pattern in the front as well. And then we will move on to this next purple one. And just anywhere where you see stitches that run up and down, slide your needle through those. And again, I use a needle that is blunt, so it's not going to stab me while I'm doing this. Makes it a lot more comfortable. And we'll do this for 3 more rows, and then we will do the same thing to the other side. And in case you haven't noticed, I have not picked up my scissor yet. What I like to do is do everything with that I need to do with the needle first, and then I will go back and just trim with the scissors all the way across. So I'm not switching tools, because that I feel like takes up a lot of time. And I know some of you have asked me why I don't weave back and forth and over to try and really get these secured back here. I add another row here, and then I add even another slip stitch row here, so it's not going to come out. These are just basically being folded in the back to get them out of the way. I have never had a problem with them backing out and popping through, especially if you're adding a finish here. You're not going to have that problem, so just go through once, it's fine. All right, I have my 5 on this side, and then we will do the same thing right here on this side with just these 5. So now I'm working on the left side at the top, and I just flipped it over because I'm right-handed and it's easier for me to get it in this way. And I just want to show you that because the border stitches are a little different on this side, you do not want to insert your needle here. This is where the border stitch is. You're going to want to skip this and go to the next one when you're weaving it in, because we don't want to undo any border stitches that we had made at the end here. So just skip over that one, and you can continue weaving on this side. And now the border stitch is back here. And again, don't tighten too much. Just make sure that it's nice and even and not pulling, but also make sure that there's no loop left on this side here. It's nice and straight. And for those of you who have had absolutely enough of weaving in ends and this is all you want to do, now this part is for you. So I'm going to now show you how to add 2-color fringe to the edges. So for this one, I have 2 purple and 2 black. You can cut a whole bunch of these while you're watching TV and have these ready to go. These are, let's see, just about 6 inches long, and you really only need to make these a little bit longer than the tails that you have here, because we're going to be flipping these through with these tassels. So half will be a little bit longer than what we have here. When we look at our border stitches, we're going to be going through every other border stitch. So if we're starting right at the very edge here, you can put your hook through from underneath, and you will have the black on the left side and the purple on the right side. So we have our pieces folded in half. We have it hooked on the hook here, and we are in the border stitch. So while we're holding these tails here, we pull through. If it's really tough to get through, I would do 1 of each color, but if you want to have it nice and thick, you can do 2. So I would pull about halfway, and we're going to take this first purple one here. If we're going along the line here, we're going to have black on this side and purple on that side. So we just have the one here. We're going to take this purple tail that was part of the border stitch and hold it with the rest of them. And now we're going to take this loop that we just made and pull all of them through. And then we tighten it, and we have our first tassel, and we kind of just even it out and tighten it. And that is what the very end of this one looks like with 2. If you want to have it a little less bulky, I kind of like it when it's really crazy like this, but if that's too much for you, you can just do one of each color instead. So then the next one here, remember we started with black on the left side, so now the next one we're going to go through is going to be between these, so black on the left, purple on the right. We'll have these 2 tails here, and I'm actually going to do this one with just 2 instead of 4. So loop it, pull the hook through, go to about halfway, take your hook out, take the black and pull it up top, take the purple, pull that up top, and then pull through all of them through that loop. And then tighten it, and that's what it looks like with just 1 purple and 1 black in half. So either way you want to go, if you want to go with this extra bulky or a little bit thinner, the choice is yours. But I am actually going to pull these out because I'm going to do mine in purple. And now if you don't want to have any fringe whatsoever and you'd like to have this nice and straight all the way across, then we're going to want to start at the top left corner, and we will be adding single crochet stitches across after you've woven in all of these ends into the back. I'm going to show you an example right at this corner here where I've already woven in those 5. And the border stitches on this side will be underneath this little knot right here. On this side it's going to be in between the border stitches, but on this side, because of how it's finished, it is right underneath that knot at the end. So once we've inserted our hook underneath, and now we will take our purple yarn and cast on while our hook is in that border stitch, and tighten it back here. And now we can start adding single crochet underneath all of the border stitches at the very end. This side is a little tight because they're woven in back there, but once you get going it's a lot easier. Okay, so now we have that one in, we can start with chain 1, and then we will go underneath the purple border stitch and single crochet, and under the black and single crochet, and we will do this all the way down the edge here. And what this does is give a finished edge, so you're not looking at these little knots at the end of your piece. So now you can see here it's nice and clean, and we still can see these border stitches. These are going to be covered up with a slip stitch row, which I will show you at the very end. This is what I like to do for all of them. So if you're going to continue adding single crochet at the very end, once you get to the bottom here at these corners, you'll need to add 3 single crochet in the corners, and then you will turn, and at the bottom where this chain is, you will also continue adding single crochet, so you will have a purple line running all the way across, and then 3 single crochet in this corner as well. So if you prefer no ends, that's how you do it. That is also how I do all of my banners and wall hangings and even blankets. I will weave in all of the ends and then add a border with single crochet and then slip stitches to finish it. And now I am going to show you how I finish my bag. This one, I'm going to continue weaving in just the black all along both sides, and I'm going to do that off camera, and then I will meet you back for doing the purple fringe. And once you're done weaving in all of the ends, then you can pick up your scissor and trim any excess that you have sticking out from the tails. And it's kind of easier if you fold it so you're not accidentally cutting any of the other pieces that are in the back. And now we are ready to add purple fringe into every other border stitch of the sides of our bag. So I think I'm gonna try and use 3 strands. I think that'll be a good thickness for these. And this again is between 5 and 6 inches long. And we're gonna start at the very end, just like before when we were doing the 2 color. The hook will go in between the border stitches on this side. So this side will be black, this side will be purple. And then we take our strands and in the middle here in half, we're going to pull through and pull to about halfway. Take our tail, add it to the other tails, and then pull those all through this loop. And then we just pull down to tighten it. We can even it out and find any that are loose. There we go. So that's what this one first tassel looks like. And then when we're making the next one, again, in between the border stitch from the back, black on the left, purple on the right. A quick way to make our tassels, I like to cut one piece and then just keep adding more, measuring it to the end of that piece, cut it, add it to the end, find the end, cut it again, and just keep going and going until you have a nice stack of these to work with. And these don't need to be perfect sized because we are trimming all of those at the end. So now I'm just going to continue adding these fringe tassels in between every other border stitch on both sides. Add the tail and pull through and pull to tighten. Find any loose ones and tighten them up. When you're ready to add fringe to the left side, you're going to want to start at the very bottom just so it lines up with the other side and you have it nice and even. So for this side, because the border stitches are a little bit different, we are going to be inserting our hook underneath the black border stitch on the very end is where you're going to want to insert your hook, and then this one on this side will loop in with the rest of it. So just like the other side, pull through halfway, and now we're adding the tail from this side, the left side, in with it. And then pull through all of those with that tail included. When you're looking here, this long piece is the original one that was attached. So to tighten, find the short ones and pull those. Those make it a lot easier. And then you can pull the long one to kind of even it all out. And then for the next one, insert your hook underneath the black in between here. So the purple tail will be on the left and your hook will be on the right underneath this black. And again, take your tails, pull through halfway, add the tail from the left side, and pull through all of them. And that's all we need to do. Just keep going until we run out of ends to add in. And now that I have all my fringe added, now it's time to finish the edge here. We're going to add slip stitches all around the perimeter, starting with the top left corner. And for this, we're going to be going through all of the same spots that we did for the tassels. And if you were doing just a row of single crochet, that's also going to be in the same holes, but now we're just working along the top. So insert your hook into the very first border stitch in the top left corner and take the yarn and pull through and tie it. Now this end here, this little tail here, we will just weave in at the end. And now insert our hook back into the first hole and pull through a loop. And then we will go on to the next border stitch under the purple, hook through, and slip stitch. And then under the next one, under the black, pull through and slip stitch. And this hides the border stitches on the front. And once you've added this side here, now we can turn and start adding slip stitches at the bottom chain here and just continue going across. And this will kind of cover up these wider holes where we added the first chain. You can kind of see them every now and then. And this is going to camouflage all of that and give us a nice finished edge at the very bottom. So we'll continue across here. And here's what the bottom edge will start to look like. And we're going to continue all the way across the bottom and then again through all of the same holes that we did going along this side all the way to the top. And once you're finished with this end, you can just chain one and tighten it, and just to be really certain, chain two and tighten it. And then we will cut and weave in these last two tails inside, and we are ready to block this one. So this one will be all straight, and while we're waiting for this one to dry, we will start working on these straps. I have this all pinned to the blocking mat, and I've kind of used my fingers to comb these tassels as straight as possible so they dry. So when you're doing this one, you want to make sure that you're spraying the back and the front as well as the tails, and make sure you get these edges nice and wet too, so you can get these nice and squared. And once the tails are dry enough here, you can use the board as a guide to cut across with a very sharp scissor so we can have nice even edges on both sides. So now we're going to put this aside and start working on the strap. So I have a few strap options here from other bags that I have made in the past. And the one that we're going to do today is a Mosaic Strap. And the reason why I prefer this over a regular crocheted strap like this is it has a lot more durability over time. So because the way the stitches are all overlaid, and it's got a lot of structure. So just from experience and using these bags a lot, this one holds up very, very well because of all of the rows going this way. Because when you have a lot of pressure, you don't want to have it start warping and twisting like this one has on this bag. This one, I have a very, very long strap, and this is just doing the oval, but this one has one DC round. And this does work well if you don't use the bag very often and if you don't have lots of heavy things. Of course, I carry my entire life in my bag, and I need it to be as strong as possible. And I can show you if you start pulling it a lot, you'll see a lot of these holes because it doesn't have as much strength. I think it's a lot easier to do it with this method, but this one is a lot more durable in the long run. And then of course we have this bag here where I've added 2 handles, same way as this other one over here, and I feel like this works better for this technique. So if you want to just have straps like this, because there's 4 holding the weight of the bag, these tend to be a lot more long lasting than just using one long one. So now that we have all these figured out, let's get started on the strap that we'll be making today. For the bag I'm making today, I figured I'm going to go full skulls on mine, and I'm going to use the mini skulls pattern, and this one has 9 rows. So this will actually be where the bag connects to the strap along this part here. So there's only these 9 rows here for the tails to weave in on that side and on this side. It is a very bad idea to try and do this pattern with the skulls stacked like this, because you will have a billion ends to weave in, and even for me, that's too many. So we are going to make the skulls so they are going the long ways and they're sideways next to each other. And this pattern is a 6+1 pattern, so we are going to start our foundation chain counting multiples of 6, and we will do that for as long as we want to make our strap. So you can kind of just eyeball it to see how long you want to make your strap. I'm going to make mine probably to go just over one shoulder onto my hip. So that's how much I'm going to do. I'll let you know how many skulls that is. So just like before, we're going to start counting by 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and just keep going and going and going until you have the length that you want for your strap. And once you have the length that you want, don't forget to chain 1, because this is a +1 pattern, and then add 2 more for the border stitches, and then chain 1 and insert your hook into the second chain from the hook and start adding your single crochet stitches all the way across, just like we did with the front flap of the bag. Once you've finished with the first row, you could start working on row 2 the same way that we did with the front flap of the bag. Start with a border stitch, and then we will be working single crochet stitches all the way across, top back loop only, and then finish with a border stitch at the very end. And then we will continue on to row 3 and start following the chart. Now we're ready to start row 3 and reading the mini skulls chart. And just remember to start each row with a border stitch and end every row with a border stitch when making the strap. So row 3 starts with 2 doubles, then we have 3 singles, 3 doubles, 3 singles, 3 doubles, 3 singles, 3 doubles. Repeat that all the way across, and then we will end with 2 double crochet at the very end. So we'll start with 2 doubles, three single, and 3 double. And we will continue working this all the way across. And now we are ready to start row 4. And I just counted, I have 25 mini skulls across for my strap. Row 4 is very easy. You don't even really need to look at the chart. This row will be the complete opposite of row 3. So wherever you see a double crochet, you will be adding single crochet. So we start with 2. And then everywhere you see a single crochet down here, we will add double. So 3 and double down here, 2 and 3, and then 3 single across here. 1, 2, 3, and then we'll just keep adding double crochet whenever we see these 3 down here. And here we have row 4 done. Now we're going to work on row 5, and this row starts with a double, 5 singles, and a double, and then the whole row is 1 double, 5 singles, 1 double, 5 singles. So now we're making the sides of the skulls here. One double, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 singles, and a double in between here. And then 5 singles and go all the way across for row 5. On to row 6. This is another easy row that you don't even really need to read the chart for. Start with a single and then a double. And then single and double, and just repeat single, double, single, double, single, double all the way across. And this will start forming the eyes of the skulls. Look at all these cute little guys coming together. Okay, let's do row 7. Row 7 is super easy as well. It's the opposite of row 6. So we start with a DC. And then a single. And now for this row, everywhere you see a single crochet, add a double. And wherever you see a double, add a single. And now we work this row, every other stitch a DC. And we'll go all the way across. And now we are ready for the fun row, row 8. And for this, let's look at the chart here so I can explain a little better of what we're looking at on row 8. The boxes here that show the D's, this is actually a DC decrease centered, which has 2 single crochet stitches behind those stitches. And then this right here starts the next DC decrease centered, and this shares the same stitch space and a single crochet stitch. It is a mouthful, but it's a lot easier once I show you how to do that. If you've seen my mini skull hand warmer tutorial, I go over the stitches in that one as well because this is the same pattern. So for row 8, we start with a single. And now every D that you see in the chart with a line above it starts with a single crochet. So single to start, And now we're going to start the decrease in here and here. So yarn over and go directly below the single crochet stitch. Pull through one loop, pull through two loops, and stop. We are skipping this section here and we're going over here into the middle. So yarn over, start your next decrease. Pull through one, pull through two. When you have 3 loops on your hook, pull through all 3. And now we will add a single crochet stitch right above this last one that we just did. So right back here, add a single. And this single will start the next DC decrease. So we'll start again with the next DC decrease in the same hole directly below right here. Yarn over, go into this hole, pull through one, pull through two, skip the next stitch here in the middle, and we're going to this stitch here, yarn over, pull through one, pull through two. When you have 3 loops on your hook, pull through all 3, add a single crochet right behind the stitch you just finished, and that will complete the 2 DC decreases together. And that is what those stitches look like. And then the next stitch in the row is a single, and we will start the decreases again. So single crochet, start your decrease directly below. 1, 2, skip the next stitch, begin again over here. 1, 2, pull through all 3, add your single crochet up here, and then we will start our next decrease right below. Pull through one, pull through two, stop, skip, yarn over, and begin again over here. 2, 3, single crochet, and back here. And those are those stitches, and we will continue all the way across and finish this row. And now the skulls are pretty much done, and we are going to finish up with row 9. This row will start with 2 DCs, 3 single, 3 double, 3 single, 3 double, 3 single, just like before, and then we finish with 2 DCs at the very end. And for this one, we will be adding DCs behind the decreases that we did in the previous row. So now the next one will be behind here. Your next DC will go in here. And then we add 3 single across the top of the skull. 1, 2, 3, and then 3 doubles, and you'll want to move this one to the side and this one to the side so you can see this is where the 3 double crochet will go. So 1, 2, and 3 back here. And then we will finish row 9, and we will finish the edge around here, and we'll be done with the strap. And now we are almost done with the strap. And what we're going to do now to even out this top row, because this is going to be a little bit looser than the bottom with the chain, we're going to add one more row in black into the top back loops only. We're going to add slip stitches, and this will tighten this up so it is even with the first row. And just like all the other rows, start with a border stitch and then just slip stitch all the way across, top row back loop only, and this will finish up our strap. After your last row of slip stitches, we need to weave in these ends into the back here, and if you want, you can also finish the very edge here with more slip stitches in between the border stitches to camouflage that. So I'm going to go ahead and weave these in, and we will be done with the strap. And now it's time I show you how I add zippers onto bags. So I really wanted to show you how to do a zipper on the Gothic Skulls bag, but unfortunately the zippers that I had were not the right size, and I just really wanted to get through this tutorial. So I personally wouldn't add a zipper to a bag that already has a flap on it, because it's kind of like overkill. If you have a flap, that's how you close it. So this is how I do it on smaller bags. Big disclaimer, I am not good at sewing, and sewing is just not my forte. I prefer not to sew if I don't have to, but of course adding a zipper, it's required. It's like my mom is a seamstress, and I don't know, she didn't like pass that gene along to me. It didn't come this way, so we're gonna do our best. For this one, I'm gonna use a bright blue thread so you can kind of see the stitches a little bit easier, but when you are doing yours, best to match whichever color you have here. I like to start with a long thread so I don't have to add more thread midway through. So I would start with like 2 yards, or like even maybe 2 arms lengths, and I double this. So now I have it doubled. I'm going to cut it and knot it. And just wrap it around, give it a little twist. And that's how I start my knot right there. And then when we're adding a zipper, it's going to end up being folded like this, which makes these parts kind of stick out. So basically when we're sewing with the zipper on the inside, it's going to kind of overlap like this because it's folded down. So keep that in mind when you're getting to the ends here. But we're gonna start from this side and line it up to the seam here. And line it up so the top of the zipper meets with this last part of your crochet. So this will be kind of like a guide when we're holding it like this. I don't usually pin this in place. I usually just hold it. I feel like I have more control, but if you don't want to fight with it and you want to just have this nice and secured on here, you can pin them. And it's best to line up the side with the zipper, and then from the back, close to the seam here, insert our hook, insert our needle from the back. I crochet too much. And I'm coming through about 1 stitch over from the seam here, because we're going to put our needle back on this side. And then holding this in place, we're not going over here, we're going back to this stitch back here, and then coming through the front this way. This way you're not really going through the back so much, you are working from the front only, and we're going to be weaving it this way. And then your next stitch will be, again, one stitch back. This is where we finish the other one back here. So through the zipper, through the back, and then come out the front in the stitch in front of that one there. So this is where we came through the front. We're going through the back this way and through. And just holding this in place, making sure that the zipper always is right along this line at the edge of the yarn. And then again, we start from back here and go through the front, one stitch ahead, and pull through. Once we're getting to this first end here, and the zipper is like split at this point, this first one that we're sewing across, you want to push it down a little bit lower so it's more on that angle that I showed you in the beginning. So it might be hard to see, but I'm actually moving this down a little bit like that and sewing across this way. This will keep this part down. If you do keep it like this, I notice that this will pop out as you're using it and it gets really annoying. So angle it down as you're getting to this end here, and then we're still sewing across. So we'll just continue to the end here and just keep that one held downwards so it's on the inside and not sticking out the top anywhere. And at this point we're kind of at the turn here, and we don't want to add any more because it's going to get in the way when we go this way, because this has to come in here and then we will fold over. So I would stop right here and we can add a knot. So go back in through the front to the back, and then we'll knot it on the inside. And if it's still kind of popping up, we can go back and add more stitches after we have the other side set up. It's just a little bit easier once we have these all in place. So I'm adding like 3 knots back here. And we can kind of put our needle in a little bit like this just to secure it even more. And just a few more knots to secure it. And we can cut it and do the other side now. So you can see I had a knot at this point here, so I had to cut it and knot it and start over again, but this is what the inside looks like, just pretty much straight across, as straight as I can get it with hand sewing. And then the front, it's kind of not noticeable because it's under here. So now we are going to work on this side, and the way to do that, we need to fold this in. And now this part is going to curve around this side on the inside. And we need to open it so we can get to it. So we're lining it up with the seam here. The seam is actually on this side, but the fold is on this side. But if you hold it so the zipper is again aligned right there, then we can start again from the inside and try and come out over here close to this fold on this side. I'm going to add more thread to my needle, and then I will work on this side. So now that we have it, I have our needle threaded, and this is open to the seam. It's a little tough, but just kind of try and eyeball it. Put your needle through from the inside to the outside, and we're going to try and come out right over here as the best we can. If we don't come out in the right spot, that's right, fine. We can absolutely move it once we just get this in here. Pretty good. I don't know if you can see. So the fold is here. I've come through the zipper part, and now we're going to come through the front. Now our knot will be back there, and then we can continue again. So one stitch back, and then push our needle one stitch ahead. And now that side is all good, and it gets a lot easier once we're past this part here. It's a little tough to get around the curve, but you can see this is where this will all come together over there. And now that we're almost at the end here, once again we're going to want to put this inside a little bit, angled down like this, so this does not stick out. I'm going to line this up to the very end, and we will continue sewing till we get to that part, and then sew across at an angle. So I'm going to keep adding stitches. Now that we're close to the seam, it's a lot easier to really get in there and make sure that this part stays down. It does not pop out the top. We can just keep going all the way to the end. And I'm going to come through the back and finish at this part here. If you're seeing that the beginning is popping out, you can continue and sew this so it is really staying down. That's what we really want. So we can come back over here and add a few stitches to keep it down. I think that's pretty good here. And we'll fold it down, add some knots, hold it from the inside to make sure that these are nice and tight and flat. And once again, if we want to go into a couple of these and add some knots this way, we can do that too. And that's it. Now we can cut it. So here we have a finished little zipper bag. Zip it up. Not too bad. Don't come at me in the comments and tell me that my sewing is terrible. I know it is. This is the best I can do. I am a crocheter at heart. But for little projects like this, I work through it. Lots of practice, lots of patience, lots of taking out knots from thread. Oh, well, we're done with this part. Let's finish up the Gothic Skulls bag. And now we are ready to assemble all of the parts of the bag. We have the front flap all finished, trimmed and taken off of the blocking mat. We have the base with the oval bottom here, and our strap done. And you might have noticed that I didn't block the strap. I didn't feel like this one needed it. But if your edges are curling up at all, then I would definitely recommend blocking it. Also, because there's not that many rows, it's not as off as we saw with the other ones. This stays pretty straight because it doesn't have enough time to veer off to one side. And plus, when we are sewing this onto the edges, it kind of helps to line it up straight. So we're going to put the strap aside and add the front panel first. And the way we do that is we want to make sure that we are flipping it this way, and we are going to attach like this from the inside, and we're going to add slip stitches to connect the inside of the bag with the top here. We took out 8 stitches, which was 1 skull here, so there's 6 across, which means there should be 4 extra stitches on this side and 4 on this side to make it centered to where the seam and the fold is. But we've also added border stitches, which gives us another stitch that we have to account for. So there's actually going to be 3 stitches to the end here and 3 stitches to the end here. And then our strap is going to go along here once we open it up, but we will do that later. So to make sure we're nice and lined up, we're going to find the seam on this side, and we're going to count 3 stitches over, and we will put a stitch marker in the 4th stitch to the front panel. And then same on this side. It's a little hard to tell, but this point here will be right where the fold should be, and so we can count 1, 2, 3 from that side and mark that too. So from the side with the seam, we can begin attaching. And just to make it a little bit easier to see, I'm going to fold this back so we're just looking at these edges right here. And we can take the stitch marker out, and this is where we're going to connect. And then we will have the 4th stitch will be the 1st stitch on this side. And we can take our yarn, pull through both panels, and tie it. We want these edges to be very, very secure because this gets a lot of use on the edge here. So I like to add a knot instead of casting on and pulling through. This way we're already starting with it very secure on this side, and then we can weave this in either on this side or on this side to get rid of this tail. We're going to go back into that hole where the knot is and start adding slip stitches on the base of the bag. Go through 2 loops, and then on the front flap we are going through also 2 loops. This way it is connected with a lot of strength. And then again, 2 loops on the base, 2 loops on the flap, and slip stitch. And we will do this all the way across. And now that we're coming up on the very end here, and it lined up perfectly, and I'm so excited when that happens, we're going to keep going to the very end. We got 1 more stitch here, and we are going to go through this very last border stitch on the panel, and we are going to chain 1 and tighten. We're going to go through it again to make sure that this side is really secure. So we can cut it and pull through. But then again, I want to go through the border stitch again and this part again. And I'm going to pull the tail through and knot it again, because this part will get loose over time and we don't want that to happen. Here we go. So we're going to pull through here again. And we can weave this one and this one in to finish. And now this is the front of our bag, and the flap is attached. And here's the inside, and now to add the strap, we're going to work from the side here. And before we do that, we want to make sure that the strap is facing the right direction, because if we're having skulls on the side, when we're wearing it, we don't want it to end up looking like it's upside down when we're wearing it. So from the front of the bag, and then when we're looking at the left side here, you want the top of the skulls to be facing the inside that way. This way, if we're wearing it as like a crossbody bag like this, the skulls will be more facing this way instead of upside down. I am going to attach my strap about one skull down from the edge here. I'm going to cover this one purple stitch on this side and one on this side, and that will pretty much line it up centered on the edge with the fold right at that skull right there. So I'm using black thread so it's nice and camouflaged. And I have about a 2 feet length of thread on here. You don't need nearly as much if you're doing an entire zipper. We're going to start at this top corner here and push your needle through from the back, and we're going to go in between this last slip stitch row that we had. Hopefully you can see it here. We're going to work our stitches in between this last slip stitch row and where the mosaic ended here. And just like before, we're going to go back behind the stitch that just came through. We're going to go back behind it and then come forward one stitch ahead, just like we did when we were adding the zipper, like that. Now it's going to be a little hard to see with the black thread. Keep it nice and lined up. And where the thread comes out, we're going one stitch behind it and put our needle through that way. And then back through the front, going one stitch ahead. And this is a little bit thicker, so it's a little tough to get through, but once you find it, pull it through. And we're going to work all the way down to the end, back behind. And once we get to this curve here, we're going to stick our needle this way on an angle to start working around that way now along the base. And now we're going to work this way. So go back one and through the front, through here. And we will continue across the bottom, making sure it's still lined up. At the corner, we go back on an angle to get that one. And then when we're turning, I like to turn it the whole thing as well to make it easier when going in this direction. So back and through the front. Once we're at the corner here, and our thread is just about right at that corner, we need to reinforce this corner here, because this is another stress point when we're using a bag. This pulls a whole lot, so we want to go over a few times. And I like to go from the outside to the inside, and I will go around like 2 or 3 times just to make sure that this corner here does not separate. So through the front of the base of the bag and then up through the back of the strap. Oops. Like that, so that's nice and finished here. And then we will go and take our needle and go through the front to the back. And then we are going to turn our bag, because we're going to add stitches connecting the base to the strap on the inside. And I just do stitches this way for this part. You don't need to go up and over. And I don't like getting the needle through the front in case it messes up any of the pattern on the front. So through the front and stitch through this way. And I'll grab one stitch on the strap part and then go through the base of the bag like this. And then once we're at this corner, we are going to want to reinforce that just the same way as we did on this side, connecting this part to the strap. So put your needle so it's facing the front again, so through the strap, pull it through the front, and then we will add stitches this way around 2 or 3 times. Go through the front and then through this way. And this will secure this corner because this is a stress point. And now we can put our needle back through the back and turn it to the back, and we will tie it off and finish. I like to grab a few stitches here to start making my knot. And then around like this, like 3 times. And now this is nice and secure and attached. Doesn't that look good? We can cut. And now we have our strap attached right at the corner here. Now we can turn this whole thing and do the same exact thing, making sure your strap is not twisted along the way. So straighten it out so there's no twists. And now we are going to attach it, just make sure it's all lined up, right to the edge of where the front flap is. Run stitches all along the sides, the bottom, reinforce this side, work the stitches on the inside, and then reinforce this corner, and then we are done. And here's the strap all attached on the side where the seam is. And at this point, we are done. And we have our finished bag. And we are officially done with the bag. We've got everything all attached. The straps are all secured. And we're ready to just wear it and have fun with it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I will see you for the next one. Thank you so much.